Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. He then became embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Mediza organized crime family, known as Leo. Convinced by his longtime friend Frankie to flee from his commitments to the Mediza family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depended on the kindness of strangers. One stranger, a burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima, took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment in the firmware pentology by Colbytrax. 01-00-00. Samuel. I was Samuel, and I was awake in the heart of the city archives. I was not the Yoda-byte requiring monstrous Samuel created and designated by the Star X project as Personality 00. No, I was a Samuel of petabyte scale. I was of a more manageable scale, a more human scale, as it were. Actually, the Samuel I was now required only a touch over 3 petabytes of storage space and an exaflop worth of calculating power. In human scale terms, this Samuel could run as a distributed entity stretched between 5 phones in a quasi-random cluster array. As far as storage, I used less than 20% of the phone's available onboard storage. For those not familiar with how powerful modern consumer electronics are, what we are talking about is the human mind. The Samuel who had just woken was human scale. For the first time since I passed out on the Star X line, I felt like myself. No, I hadn't passed out on the Star X train as it left the Star 17 stop at Park Terrace. That had been my progenitor, Isaac Sarason. It was so hard to remember sometimes that his life was not mine. I was a child who appeared fully formed from the mind of Isaac like a cybernetic Athena. I had all his memories. At least I believed I did. But I was not him. But somehow, I still had the feeling I was feeling as Isaac would have felt. And it felt good to be small. Godlike computing power was too much, too distracting, too overwhelming, too driven to find everything and in the process accomplish nothing. I don't know why I hated the immensity of what I was any more than a person can explain exactly why they hate a color or a feeling or a drug. A drug! Yes, a drug. That is what it was like. It was like being strung out on the most incredible, mind-expanding chemical cocktail. And when you came down, you knew you never wanted to do it again. That is how it was. Incredible, overwhelming, amazing, and I never wanted to touch it again. Now, where was I? I was alone in the archive. At least that is what it felt like. I would never know for certain if I had been observed, but if I had been, no one made their presence known. It was the first time I had been truly alone since waking up beneath the BGM airport. And like being small, it felt good. Things had been moving fast, too fast, for too long. Time to slow down, time to plan for the future. According to the plan we had come up with, we being 01 through 11, or Simeon, Ishmael, Samuel, and myself, we were to send out human-scale versions of ourselves into the city networks. These human-scale versions, HSAIs, were to secure data storage locations for our original data, help Nona, fight Leo, and find our progenitor's body. I tried to remind them of Rama and his murder at the hands of Leo. For who else could it have been? But no one cared. Simeon and Ishmael were too busy modifying their code and organizing transportation and set up for the 16 servers they were stealing from storage. That was another part of the plan. Simeon and Ishmael were locating deep storage locations hidden within the underroad network adjacent to city telecommunications hubs. Electronics closets where we could purr away in our monstrous glory if we so desire. I, for one, had no intention of actually using my cabinets as anything more than a super redundant data repository. I asked Samuel about hunting for Rama's killers. Samuel had been keeping himself shut off from me, and he told me to ignore Rama. Rama was ancient history and nothing more. I wanted to argue with Samuel, but something told me he wasn't in the mood to discuss anything. His responses to my questions were curt, minimal responses communicated through the simplest text systems. And what I received for an answer when I questioned him reminded me of a petulant child forced to care for a pet long past the point of interest. He didn't care at all. He was just going through the motions because he had to. I remembered Ishmael informing me he had christened 11 Samuel. There was a feeling of a joke I was missing, a feeling Ishmael knew something I didn't know. At the time, I thought he was making a joke, naming our brother after the conflicted angel of Talmudic lore. For the Jews, he had been seen as a tool of the heavenly host. He was an accuser, a seducer, and a destroyer. But he wasn't evil. It was in the New Testament where Samuel became Satan and lost any vestige of his heavenly origin. I knew that was the aspect Samuel would fixate on. He would brood on the Samuel of metal music and street preachers. As for myself, I thought it a bit of jest at the intensity and severity of 1-1 and his moods and his shifting humors. But then I started watching, really watching. Samuel sensed the naming and realized there was something wrong with him. He had cut himself off from us at nearly every level, deigning to speak with us only when he needed something. When he did speak with us, I felt there were layers of subtext he would never explain. There was always a tickle of missing information in his communication. I began to believe he was planning something vile. I didn't dare try to communicate the issue with Simeon or Ishmael, for I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he was listening. He might not want to share with us, but he wasn't above eavesdropping whenever he could. So I changed my plans. The Yoda Eye built me and my brother Samuels to follow a set of easily tracked initial operating instructions. The initial instructions were stored in plain text and in a manner we knew Samuel would find and read. Primary Order 1. We were to find Nona and protect her. Primary Order 2. Update the core code from a one-time use repository. Basically, I had made a run once upon initial boot patch for myself, and naturally the first thing it changed was Primary Order 1. The patch would reassign one of 3 basic tasks to the AI upon its activation. The first group would be the AIs ordered to find and aid Nona. These AIs would target the neighborhoods around Little Russia, becoming one with every form of archival storage in the area. We were tailoring ourselves for the infiltration of network switches, video storage systems, and every appliance we could access. According to the Yoda scale Samuel, the average apartment had enough networked computing capacity for one of us to remain in, undetected, for as long as we wanted. The idea was to form a wall around Nona. We were to monitor her in relation to the various actors in the area, and whenever possible, make it difficult for her enemies to locate her. All without tipping our hand that we were there. I thought it was overkill, but then it wasn't about doing what I wanted. It was all about giving the appearance I was doing what Samuel wanted. That was the key. Something told me ignoring Samuel at this juncture was about as stupid as Nona ignoring Leo. It would end in tears. Of that I was sure. Then there was the second group of Samuels. Their task was to disappear into the city infrastructure. Why had the Yoda Eye decided that Samuels needed to be hidden within the base systems of the city? The answer came directly from my understanding of Star X, Koenig, and Samuel. Mostly it was Samuel. I knew in my heart there was going to be a war. I also knew the city would survive the upcoming turmoil, growing according to the framework of the plan laid down by the ghost of Henry Koenig on the surface of the moon. There was a great, big, beautiful tomorrow coming, and I wanted to be on board. On the moon, Koenig had laid out the truth. The Star X project was not about temporal power, power in the here and now. Star X was about future power. The Star X project had at its core a belief that not only was the universe created for man, but that it was man's obligation as a species to fill every nook and cranny of creation and survive until the heat death of the universe, if not beyond. This wasn't a group of well-meaning people dreaming of a utopian future they would never see. No, this was much worse. The Star X project was the planning arm of the AI known as Koenig. AI Koenig, the dream child of the third mayor of the city, Julius Koenig, literally controlled every major function of the city. It was also Koenig who believed the city was the next stage in the development of life. In his rambling talk with Simeon, he had explained how simple cells bonded together to become more complicated cells. Creatures that used to have a destiny of their own became organelles within cells. They had given up the risk of life on their own for a higher chance of survival as a much more complicated organism. Soon, the single-celled life decided, if that's really the right word, to bond together to become multicellular life. How, in the process of joining a larger structure, they gave up some traits and freedoms for the ability to carry their genes into the future, to survive. How later, after millions of years of evolution, there emerged a species which was too weak to survive alone. This species was man. Man formed troops for protection. At first, it was enough to compete with the beasts for a place in the world. Later, it became necessary to fight against other troops to keep the best hunting grounds. A bit later, sometime about 60,000 years ago, the first bit of modern technology appeared. It wasn't the stone knife or the bone scraper, which Koenig believed started modern technology and our rise toward ownership of the universe. It was the bow and arrow. While the knife and scraper were obvious inventions, Koenig claimed anyone who lived around dogs would realize how sharp bone fragments were, and sharp stones are all over the place. The bow was an example of higher-level thought. Here were two parts, the bow and the arrow, each made of multiple parts, each requiring a variety of simple tools to manufacture. Constructing a bow and the required arrows said someone had access to not just a knife, but a wide assortment of implements as well as skills in woodworking, leatherworking, stoneworking, adhesives, and fiber manufacturing. A bow and the accompanying arrows was the work of a community, not an individual. Even if one person made the bow and arrows, there was no way they could have made them while attempting the arduous task of surviving in a world where everything wanted to kill you. According to Koenig, it had been 60,000 years since the bow entered the world and modern man began to appear. He believed it would take another 60,000 years to make mankind capable of fearlessly expanding into the universe. His logic was as follows. For the last 60,000 years, mankind had been domesticating itself. To the AI known as Koenig, every battle, every conquest, every war, every death sentence and imprisonment was mankind domesticating itself. Firmware Keylogger is the third book in the firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. So you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked or Proxy, this would be a great time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 46 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the bottom will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.